Awesome, guys. Thanks very much for the applause. I appreciate it. Can you just give me a big thumbs up if you can hear me okay, guys, if things are good in the world? Awesome. That's great. Good to see so many of you here for the session. I'm looking forward to having a great time with you. So we're kicking off pretty much right on time, which is fantastic. And I promise to finish on time as well. And I promise there'll be plenty of time to ask questions today, both at the end of the session and also during the session. So if you have any questions during the session, please catch the attention of the moderators in your room or pop something in the chat, and I'll be happy to deal with those as we move through the presentation. Firstly, we'll just start rotating through these slides, and I've got some important messages for you. One of the things I am going to ask you to do today is I am going to ask you to work collaboratively with some of your friends. Now, I realise depending upon where you are, you might be sitting very conveniently at a table of friends, which is great. They are now your best buddies, whether you've met before or not. Otherwise, if you're in a remote location, if you're working with some people, that'd be terrific. Otherwise, if you're by yourself and everyone's run away, or you're by yourself remotely, please use the chat to share your thoughts. I will be asking questions on a regular basis today. And also, if you've got questions, please interrupt at any time, ask your question, and the first convenient opportunity, I'll get to it and I'll ask the questions. Okay, guys, does that all sound good, those ground rules for today? Excellent. All right, got a few thumbs up. That's what we need. About the presenter, you've already got my details from the bio, and I do thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you very much. There's some details there on the slide. I will repeat that slide at the end of the presentation so that you can see my Twitter handle and website addresses and all the bits and pieces. And I've been very, very lucky for the last 13 years now to be working at MRWED, which is an RTO that specialises in training and assessment. And through that, I've literally had the chance to train thousands of students online and through face-to-face classes in presentation skills. And something really weird has happened to me over the last couple of years, whereby I've just come to this place where life has been great for me. It started probably in May last year, where I had the chance to go overseas on long service leave for MRWED, and I was away for 6 weeks and we went travelling around Europe. And some of you may recognise where that picture is taken that's up on the slides at the moment. If anyone does recognise it, please, if you have chat handy, pop it in the chat. Otherwise, yell your answer out to Chris, and they'll pop it in the chat there at the Convention and Exhibition Centre. But had a beautiful holiday travelling around Europe. And when I came back, something odd had happened at MRWED. We started talking about making a change in strategic direction. And that change in strategic direction for us really caught me, and it put my heart literally on fire. Well, maybe I shouldn't say literally, but it gave me a burning passion. And what we were doing was we're heading more of an interest of helping our students remotely, our online students, through webinars. And this was an area that has always interested me, and it really caught my attention because I love the idea of teaching face-to-face, but teaching remotely suits my lifestyle, and also is something that I haven't seen done very well, especially in Australia over the last few years. And so I developed this goal, this burn within me to teach people how to deliver webinars beautifully. And that leads me to where I am today. I've got my own website blog where I publish articles and videos each week. I'm about to start the first podcast in the world on iTunes, which is dedicated to webinar skills, and that'll be launching in iTunes. Might slip into the first or second week of July, but that's coming very soon. And I'm loving life and loving talking to people about webinars. And I can't think of anything better to do today than to be talking to you guys. So that's where I am at, and that's where I'm coming from. So if I speak a little bit passionately about webinars and online presenting today, don't excuse me. Just try to go with the flow and understand that it gives me great joy to do that. Now, we've got a bit of a challenge in the slide that's coming up now. We've got a man who's eating a burger. And there's a few different things wrong with his burger, but there's one thing that really troubles me about this scene with the burger, and that is the lack of what I call the secret sauce. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you the secret sauce, not so much for your burgers, but for your webinar delivery and for online presenting. This is something I've reflected on and thought a lot about. I've watched a lot of webinar presenters as a way of upskilling myself, and now I'm passing that knowledge on to people. And there's one thing in particular that I find differentiates the really good webinar presenters from the ho-hum and the ordinary. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today is the secret sauce that not only makes webinars better, but also other live streaming applications. And we've seen a steady stream of them in recent years, like Meerkat and Periscope and Blab. They're all a great deal of fun if you've never had a chance to check those out. And more recently, we've seen the big boys entering the market. Facebook Live is rapidly overhauling the way we use Facebook. And we haven't seen so much of it yet, but over the next few months, Facebook Live and video on Facebook is going to drastically change the way people consume content and the way they use Facebook. And YouTube is sitting in the back. They're still developing their strategy. And depending who you listen to, they're going to release something awesome sometime soon. So live streaming is becoming very popular, just like webinars are. And the rates of growth in these areas are amazing. So if you're being tapped on the shoulder and given the opportunity to participate as a webinar presenter, I'd strongly and enthusiastically recommend to you that you consider that, because it gives you greater skills, and those skills are going to be very valuable to those who've worked for training providers in coming years. So how are we going to break things down today? Well, there's basically 3 subtopics I'm breaking today's presentation up to. First, what is the secret sauce? It would be cruel and unusual punishment if I didn't tell you early on what the sauce is, so we'll be looking to do that. Secondly, we'll go into why the secret sauce is important. And the third thing we'll be covering today is how do we apply the secret sauce? How do we use it? Now, it's looking to me like we might have a question at the Perth Convention and Exhibition Centre. Is that correct? Have we got a question, guys?
Hi there. I was wondering if you could, it may seem like a basic question, but could you define what you see as a webinar, please?
Sure. Great question. So what we're doing today is a webinar effectively, and basically it's where somebody's in a remote location presenting content, and they could be just talking, or they could be presenting slides like I am today. And there's some degree of interaction between both of the parties. So for example, for today, we've got a chat function. Might not be as obvious to the folks in the Perth Convention Exhibition Centre because you're not sitting in front of a computer yourself, but we do have some remote participants as well who have the opportunity to engage in chat. Basically, essentially, that's a webinar. But it's useful for me to point out at this stage that there is a grey area. There's a big grey area between webinars and other live streaming apps, and even other weird situations, such as when you're in a classroom delivery, but using some other online technologies. I myself, I don't get caught up too much on that greyness. If people are presenting, and it needs to be live is how I see it, if people are presenting live, then you've got a webinar happening if it's done remotely. Does that make sense? Is that a fair answer that helps you out? Otherwise, I'm happy to talk for hours about this afterwards and about the different live streaming apps and the differences between the different systems. Happy with that? I can see you. Yep, we're good? Okay, cool. Awesome. So there are 3 things we're going to cover today: the what, the why, and the how. So moving forwards, let's start with the what. And of course, the what is going to be the secret sauce, but I've got a little graphic I want to show you first. And this ties in very nicely with something my wife has said to me for years. And she's had a saying that she's been using for years. This slide looks a little bit like Titanic meets Picnic at Hanging Rock, with the girls standing on the edge of the rock, looking out over the landscape, and the thunderstorms are brewing. There's going to be some adventure happening. And the saying that my wife repeatedly gives me is, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Now, I never quite concluded that my wife invented this saying, and with a little bit of research, I found that it was an author called Stephen Hunt that this saying is attributed to. But what I'm going to suggest to you today, and a lot of today is an emotional trigger, so I'm going to give you some very, very hardcore, concrete ideas towards the end of the webinar as to how you become a better online presenter. But through most of the first half or so, it's going to be the behind the scenes mindset issues. Because if you get those right, then you'll take action on the important things that I'm going to be presenting to you later in the webinar. And what this slide does is it shows to me the type of attitude that you want to have if you want to be a really, really good webinar presenter. If you want to be an ordinary presenter and just do your job, then you're going to get some value out of today. But what today is being pitched at is today is being pitched at the people who want to really excel, the people who want to stand out as being fantastic webinar presenters, the people who are going to be tapped on the shoulders in your workplaces to go and present a webinar opportunity that might arise, the people who are going to want to get great feedback from your students in terms of the way you present your webinars. So if you're one of those folks and you're striving for the top, then I think that saying will have some merit for you today. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space, get outside your comfort zone and push, and challenge yourself to get really, really good at webinars. So what is the secret sauce for webinar presenters? Well, it'd be, excuse me a second, it'd be cruel and unusual punishment if I didn't tell you straight away. And it's basically 7 letters, 1 word. And what I'm looking for you to do here is I'm looking for you to yell it out, throw it in the chat. I want you to tell me what you think the word is as soon as you see it. Have we got any takers already? People who say, you think you know what the magic word is? It's got 7 letters. I'll start showing the letters. Yes, we've got a taker, have we, Chris? I can hear a microphone on somewhere. Here we go.
I can't count. It's only 6 letters. Engage.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a good try. It's a good try. It's a really good try and a very relevant try to what we're going to do today. And in fact, you could have made it engaged. That would have given you the 7, but that's not the word, but it's very close to what we're after. So I'll start showing you some of the letters and we'll see if that helps us out here, eh? So the first letter I want to show you is V. We've got a V in the middle. And as soon as you think you know what the answer is, please yell it out or grab the mic, get my attention, throw it in the chat. We've got the folks at Broom have suggested that it's inspire. That's another good attempt, but again, not quite right. Give you another letter. We've got a Y on the end. Mystery word. Hope you guys are having fun playing along wherever you are. We've got an E. Have we got another go?
Yeah, yes. No.
No? Missed it by that much, was it? Okay, let's give you another one. We should be getting pretty close by now. Come on, guys. You can do it. You can do it.
Bravery.
Bravery. Give yourself a pat on the head. You are correct. Bravery is the magic word. So well done. How about a round of applause wherever you are in Western Australia? Very nice, very nice. Bravery is the key word, and this is why it's the key word. Bravery gives you the opportunity to do the things that aren't obvious, to find out the information that will help you improve, and to do the little things and to make the extra effort and get you out of your comfort zone so you can achieve amazing things. Now, obviously, bravery wasn't a concept that was created just for webinars, but it applies perfectly to the webinar environment, because the one thing that differentiates the people with ho-hum skills in live presenting or in webinars to the people who are fantastic is their ability to be brave. And we're going to talk about that bravery and the things that make you brave and the things that will take you and catapult your webinar and presentation and skills. And we're going to talk about those during this next 45 minutes. So let's start off with the why. I said we'd start with the what, and the secret sauce is bravery. Let's move on to the why. Why is it so important? And fundamentally, the reason it's so important is what we see in the slide. We see a young girl and she looks a little bored, maybe as if her head's starting to hurt and she's got a headache. Now, I think we've all had students who felt like this and looked like this in all of our presentations, whether it's online or webinars. But what we want to do is we want to push past that. We want to present content that is so interesting and so relevant and that touches people on a personal level that they're not going to get to this stage. In fact, if you bring up a word cloud of boring, you'll see there's not a lot of good things to see. Boring, much, long, read, information, text, death even appears on the left-hand side. And of course, we've all suffered from death from PowerPoint and death from boredom and not engaging all of the different learning styles. In a webinar, you want to try and engage as many of the learning styles as possible. And what you want to do is you want to move away from the boring and instead move to the inspiring. Move to the inspiring, the amazing, the strong, the wonderful, the energetic. And if nothing else, I hope to encourage you to do that today. So I'm going to tell a bit of a story here for a few seconds, and it all hinges around where is your poon. Is anyone aware of where is your poon, where your poon is? Any takers? I can't see anyone jumping out of their seats at the moment. That's okay. It's not necessarily the world's best known place. It is in Queensland, yes. Whereabouts in Queensland?
Who really cares?
Oh, love the East versus West flame war. Let's bring it on. That's great. It's interesting you say that, because the slogan for your poon is "Where the hell is your poon?" So not many people tend to know where it is. Your poon, the truth of the matter is, your poon is near your knife and your fork. Get it? Your knife, your fork, your poon. Yeah, if you're not getting it, hopefully someone next to you will explain it to you. Yeah, I know some of you are probably thinking, oh my gosh, dad joke, yeah, whatever. Try to push past it. There's some valuable content coming, I promise. So Yeppoon is in central Queensland. It's on the coast just near Rockhampton in central Queensland. And why that's important is that I spent 2 years in Yeppoon. I was there for grades 11 and 12. And during grades 11 and 12, we had a surf shop and we had a lot of fun, and I was studying hard at school, and there was a man who touched me, and his name was Peter Van Gastel. I'll never forget that name. Haven't seen him since I left school. And Peter Van Gastel was an economics teacher, and for some reason I didn't really understand, I was really attracted to economics. I liked the numbers, I liked the finances, and I liked dealing with money. All those things caught my attention. But what really was happening was it was the teaching style of Mr. Peter Van Gastel. He was very engaging. He would talk to people one-on-one, and he'd have these amazing classes with 20, 25 students in them, with a content that most people would consider very dry, very boring, but he made it really interesting. He went out of his way to make the content interesting and present it using lots of different techniques and lots of different ways. And he caught my attention enough to the extent where I actually went and studied economics at university and ultimately wrote a thesis about consumption tax. And at the time, we didn't have a major consumption tax in Australia. And about 11 years after my thesis, we ended up with the GST, the Goods and Services Tax. Now, I probably should mention at this stage that I don't feel as though I was responsible for the Goods and Services Tax. So please, when you go to the shops tonight and you're paying 10% extra, please don't think that Damian was responsible for that. But the point of this story is Peter Van Gastel inspired me with the way he trained and the way he taught. And he led me down a career route which has led me to where I am today, because it taught me two things. It taught me a love of economics, and it also taught me a love of teaching and how effective we could be as teachers if we went that extra mile. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to turn my webcam off at my end at the moment so Chris doesn't freak out too much. And let you just concentrate on the slides for a little while, because what we're going to do is we're going to start breaking down these and unwrapping 4 pillars of why bravery is essential to being a great webinar presenter. Basically, if you can unwrap these 4 items that I'm going to present during the next 5 or 10 minutes, you will see the benefits that bravery will bring you in an online presentation situation. And they do apply to face-to-face presentation as well. So even if you're not delivering webinars yet, hopefully you'll find a lot of merit in what we're going to talk about during this next 10 minutes, because bravery unlocks things for you. And there are 4 big benefits of being brave. The first of those is it establishes connection. What we want to do, and I'll explain how to do these things later, but I want to set the scene of the benefits of taking the steps that I'm going to talk about today. And you will be able to more effectively connect with your students. You'll be able to make them feel as though you care about them by making the extra effort. And I think we've all seen that. The fact that you're in this room means that you're a trainer, you're a person or a manager of trainers, whatever the case might be, who really has a commitment to professional development and a commitment to doing the right thing by your students. And so you want to create that as connection with your students so they feel as though you care about them and that you're really making that extra effort to help them. The second benefit of bravery is the potential for engagement. And if you're effective at making that connection with your students, then they're going to want to engage with you. We've got a graphic on the screen of a share button. Don't go looking for it on your laptops at home. I don't expect you to find it there. But when people share things on Facebook, when they share things on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever the case might be, they're making a statement that they've connected with the presenter or the person who's provided that content. That's what we want to happen. We want our students to be so engaged and so interested in what we're doing that they want to share our content and they want to engage with us. The next step beyond that is emotion. And you could go to training courses about presentation skills for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And the word emotion is never likely to come up, except for really, really good classes. Emotion is really important because our students act on emotion as much as they do on logical thinking. Whether they decide to do the work, whether they decide to listen to you, whether they decide to participate and get enthusiastic about the training, whether they do their homework, all of these things are an emotional response. And the best way for us to tap in to the emotions of the student and agitate and positively impact the emotions of the student are to create that connection and create that engagement. Once we do those things, the student is going to get emotionally vested in who we are and what we're presenting. And the interesting paradox about this is that the best way to get our students emotionalized about the content is for us to be emotional as well. The last thing we want to do as webinar presenters is present something that's monotone, dull, boring, and implicitly showing a disinterest in our topic. Instead, we want to be passionate, we want to be enthusiastic, we want to be excited. We want to express our emotion for what we're doing. If we get annoyed, express the emotion. If something's frustrating, let's express that emotion. If we love something, let's tell the people who are listening about it. And those emotions really will feed over to the students and they'll get emotional about our content in positive ways as well. And finally, the fourth benefit of being brave in webinars and online presenting is that it promotes relationship building. It promotes the opportunity for our students to develop positive relationships with us. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want them to be engaged, we want them to be connected, and we want them to have a positive relationship with us. So with all of that in mind, we've got a summary slide of the four. It's about connection, engagement, emotions, and relationships. And what we're trying to do is we're using bravery during online presentations to feed into that and create those relationships with our students. Now, I've been talking for quite a while here, so I do very deliberately want to stop right now. I want to stop and see if there are any questions that you guys have. Fire away, please ask whatever you like. And I promise very shortly after the questions, we're going to start moving into a bit more concrete content as to how we put this bravery in emotion. But let me stop for the moment. If you've got a question, please call out for the microphone if you're at the Perth Convention and Exhibition Centre. Otherwise, if you're in a remote location, please don't hesitate to use the chat. Hi, how are you?
Hi, my question is actually relates to face-to-face classes as well as online delivery, but it's when you're using PowerPoint slides like you are with just a picture. Are you worried that or how do you get past the fact that your students, such as me sitting here now, I'm spending the whole time writing and I'm trying to listen to you as well? Like, do you give them the content before or after so that they know they don't have to spend the whole time writing? How do you work around that?
Great question. I don't have a set response for it. I think it's a yes or a no, depending upon the circumstance. And I think the best way to answer that question is for you to know your students and to know what works best for them. And if in doubt, then you can cover all bases by perhaps providing them with a copy of the slides beforehand, providing them access with resources beforehand so they can study it or have it with them if they like, and then they've got all the options available to them. Although in my experience, you often provide materials to students beforehand and they don't look at them because they're busy, and even if it would suit their purposes, they often don't look at it. But I think about giving them lots of choices is good, but ultimately that's not necessarily the right answer. For today, for example, I didn't want to give you a copy of the slides to look at before, because the way I'm approaching this webinar today is, and some of you will have seen this already, is I'm building up a degree of suspense and anticipation as to what's coming next. That was a very deliberate strategy today. It's an engagement strategy. I'm confessing all my sins to you now, but I wanted you to think through, okay, what could the special sauce be? What could these 4 towels be representing? What are they going to be, these strategies that Damian's going to give us to apply bravery? And so that's the approach I've taken today, rightly or wrongly. But if you know your students and what works well for them, then that's a step in the right direction. Also, it's not just your total group of students, but there might be just individual students as well that you need to make special allowances for. It's not necessarily because they've got special needs or LLN challenges, but you might recognise that there's certain ways to help particular students, and you might tailor the way you do things to help those specific students. Does that help? Or have you got a follow-up question at all?
No, that helps massively. Thanks a million.
No worries. Next question. Fire away, guys.
Hi, Damian. It's Lynn from Blue Gem. One of the things that we do with our webinars is that we record them, so to give the our clients the opportunity to review those presentations. Is that something you do as well? Because I find that a really good tool. It means they can always go back and review and stop and start, etc.
Lynn, great question. It's good to see you, by the way, Lynn. I did meet you a few years ago. How do we answer this one? Again, it's a yes-no situation, depending upon your situation. In a study environment where you're training students, I think it's great to make those webinars available to them. So I love the fact that you guys do that. Sometimes, however, some providers will form the opinion that if they make the webinars available as a replay, that people might not show up, and that can kill your attendance rates. And that could be a potential problem where you want to get a lot of engagement, etc., and you want to have people there, and you want to know that they're on the ball, and you want to get that feedback during that webinar as well. So again, it's not a yes or no type situation. I do know that most webinar participants love replays. They love them, love having them available. Whether they always watch them or not, that's another factor. And it's interesting that one of the points I want to make today is that there's not a lot of research about webinars out there. And I hope that maybe NSEVRA or somebody picks this up at some stage, because I've gone looking around seeing how there's webinar research to help us with the vet industry, and there's not a lot out there. It's a case that I don't think people are being commissioned to do that research, and people who are really good at webinars are probably doing a lot of it rather than wanting to research it, because of the nature of the beast that we're online presenters and we love to present, not necessarily to research. So I don't think there's a lot of research to guide us about that, but the fact that you guys make those webinar replays available, I know will be very popular with a lot of your clients, and keep doing that unless there's a compelling reason not to, I'd suggest.
Great, thank you.
No worries.
Just another question,
Hello.
Dan. Karen from North Metropolitan. Just wondering, in creating webinars, is there a formula for teacher talk, what's happening now, and slides and PowerPoint? And, is there something a gauge where you think, no, I'm doing a bit too much talking? Is there something you use to guide you? Because I know, not so much with webinars, but when I view a YouTube clip, if it's more than 10 minutes, I don't view it. I'll pick another one that's shorter and sweeter just to learn how to do something.
Yeah, the answer again is no. I can't point you to any particular resource that's going to help us, especially in the vet space. So it's a little bit of a trial and error thing. I have general formulas that I like to follow. There are things I'll routinely do in pretty much every webinar. In fact, what's interesting is some of the content that I'll be giving you shortly will tell you some of those things that I tend to do in every webinar. But yes, I've developed some formulas. There are other formulas that are very step by step, but unfortunately some of the better ones of those cost over $1,000 to obtain. The people who are doing really, really good webinar teaching about how to instruct webinars are charging premium prices for it at the moment. So I think that's why there's a place in the marketplace for someone like myself who's just out there on a weekly basis just giving it away for free, and at some stage maybe we'll try and cover our costs with that. But there are some lockstep formulas. Most of the material that's out there and published, however, isn't really for educationalists like ourselves. A lot of it is for sales webinars, because that's where people are really prepared to pay for it, because they know that if they can master webinars in a sales environment, they can make a lot of money back, and therefore the people who are developing those sales structures are developing them upon where webinars are being used to generate money. So, you know, I could go on for an hour about some of the things that I tend to do in webinars. Probably easier way to do that, especially if you like YouTube, is go to my website, because there's about 18, 20 clips up there at the moment about how to build better webinars. And you may be really pleased to hear, Karen, that most of them, not all of them, but most of them are less than 10 minutes. You know, I'd encourage you to have a look there. And the good thing about Google as well, Google is our friend, and there's lots of stuff out there about webinars. So pick and choose what works for you.
Hi, Damian. Kerry here again from North Metropolitan. I have a perspective from a distance learning, flexible learning point of view for our ESL students particularly, but any students. Do you have any hints on how to engage and motivate students to actually tune into webinars? If that's, you know, say they know when you're presenting it, but how do you get students to actually set themselves up and be motivated enough to want to listen?
Yep, great question. Thanks, Kerry. Look, I think the number one tip is make them so good that they want to be there. And I think that a lot of the strategies we're going to be talking about in the second half of today's webinar are about creating those levels of participation and engagement that your students will hopefully say, you know what, this is going to be interesting. I don't want to miss this. So there's going to be some good content, and it's going to be presented in a dynamic, interesting way. If people are presenting really boring, monotone webinars, and there's a lot of them out there, it makes it really hard for the students to get engaged and want to attend the webinar. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I'd suggest is a little bit more of a practical measure. Reminders. Our students, as much as we'd love them to be on the ball and to have their number one priority of tuning in to watch our webinar or online presentation, that's not necessarily the case. They get distracted by life. And so if you can organise reminders so that they know exactly when they're going to be on, and that makes it almost impossible for them to miss it, I think that's a very helpful thing. And we're moving into the stage now where a lot of the webinar systems have integrated lots of emails, and you can customise emails to send out to the students before the classes are on, but it's moving beyond that into the SMS space now. So some of the more proactive, modern webinar systems are creating inbuilt systems within the webinar systems so that you can automatically send SMS reminders to students. So it makes it really, really hard for a student if they're sitting at their home and they get this SMS reminder 15 minutes before the webinar that, oh, your webinar's about to start, makes it almost impossible for them not to be there unless they choose not to. So hopefully those two strategies help you, Kerry.
Thank you.
No worries. Have we got maybe one more question? Yep.
Yeah, Damien, Patrick Crosby from the Submarine Training Systems Centre. My question sort of centres on part of your last answer. Do you have a process in place so that you can review your webinars with a view to continuous improvement? Because, you know, you've got people who are monotone and whatever. So, yeah, do you have anything in place for that?
Right. You know what? I'd love to tell you that we've got some sophisticated model that we've developed here at Mr. WED with lots of checklists and forms as to how we review our webinars. We have no such thing at this stage. What we do is we have a sit-down chat. And that sit-down chat usually involves two people, usually myself, because I'm sort of the webinar guy, and also our Mr. WED CEO, Mark Ratcliffe, because the guy is as obsessed with webinars as I am and has unbelievable skills. So what tends to happen is after we do webinars, we have a chat, we have a debrief, and we work out what the lessons learned are, and we move forward. The other thing that we've done is, which is very clever as well, is we've asked all of our staff to give us feedback whenever they hear something or whenever they think something. So from time to time, we'll regularly have them sit on a webinar, even though they don't need to be there. We'll have them sit in and just provide feedback about what they're seeing and how they're feeling, and provide that feedback to us. And sometimes it's really good to get that objective feedback from another experienced trainer. Apart from that, we always push really, really hard to get those survey forms sent back after each webinar. We use GoToTraining here at MRWED, and one of the things that GoToTraining and GoToWebinar as well, and I think GoToMeeting, although I'm not sure about that one, one of the things they allow you to do is put a feedback form right in front of the face of the participant the moment they leave that webinar. It comes up on a browser and it's right there looking at you. And that's fantastic because it gets really good response rates and that way we get lots of feedback. And we spend a lot of time crafting our questions on the survey. We keep it relatively short. We never have more than 5 questions so that we can hopefully get good response rates, because people don't look at it and say, oh, well, I'm going to be here for hours filling in this form. And the questions are very cleverly crafted, so we get the answers to the questions we need to know as to, okay, how are we going to improve? And it's very much got an improvement focus. It does sound very positive, our webinar feedback form, because the first question is, what did you like? And then there's basically 4 questions, and the intention of those questions is normally to get the bad stuff. What don't they like? What didn't they like? What could we do better? So we're trying through those mechanisms, and then we have our sit-down chat. And we found that even over the course of a month, our webinars keep improving because we keep putting these processes in place. So thanks very much for your question. I hope you're able to take that on board the submarine. I'd really appreciate it. I like thinking that my content today is going to go under the water as well as on the top of it. So thanks very much. No worries. Guys,
occasionally we plant people in the audience that might be paying attention as well. So.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. It's good to see you, buddy. I've got to say, Jason, by the way, the camera is very slimming from my angle. You look fantastic. Yeah. Guys, we might move forward if that's okay. All right. So, and I will look forward to Jason's feedback after the session. There's no doubt about that as well. Guys, what we're going to do now is going to move into the how. The how do we apply the bravery? How do we make our webinars better? I think this is the section of today's webinar that you're going to enjoy the most. It's going to start off by talking about the 4 steps to become a webinar presenter. One of the things that was in the little description for today was that I'd actually go through the steps of becoming a webinar presenter. So I need to have this in here. It's not overly complicated. It's fairly simple. It's like most things. Knowing the steps isn't too difficult. It's knowing the detail behind the steps. But I felt that this slide of 4 steps to become a webinar presenter was a little understated, so I jazzed it up to catch your attention. It's actually the 4 steps to become a respected, world-class, unbelievably good, awesome, popular, mind-blowing, gnarly webinar presenter. So hopefully I've got you a vote to have a look at these 4 things. Let's have a peek. The first thing is to watch others. I want to encourage you today to become a webinar voyeur. Watch other people. Find other good webinar presenters and watch them like a hawk. See what they do. See what they do well. See the things that they do differently to those who present the mundane and boring. And it's as simple as doing some Google research. Go to Google, type in best webinar presenters, awesome webinar presenters, whatever works best for you. In my case here, I've done a Google search on awesome webinar presenters who are not Damian Noud. And for some reason, Google has given me a whole page about Damian Noud. So I'd suggest drop the name Damian Noud off it and do that search yourself, and you'll find some fantastic webinar presenters, and you'll be able to watch their webinars. And you only have to watch for 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll get the feel for how they roll and what they do well, and then you duplicate their best practices. The second thing is to get the equipment. So the 4 steps to becoming a webinar presenter. Watch others, get the equipment. Now, I could talk for days about the equipment, but let me just say this. People get too enthusiastic and too emotionally vested about the webinar equipment. Whether you're going to be a good webinar presenter or not has very little to do with the equipment. There are things you can do to make it easier for yourself. There are things you can do to make yourself sound better and look better, but don't get crazy about the equipment, because ultimately it's akin to delivering a face-to-face course. And you're delivering a face-to-face course and you walk into a room and you see a blackboard there. Now, if I saw a blackboard there, I'd be excited because I haven't used a blackboard for a long time. And I'd be having fun getting that chalk going. But some people don't want the blackboard. They want the fancy electronic whiteboard. And your skills as a presenter in a classroom environment don't care so much about whether it's a blackboard or an electronic whiteboard. Your skills are your skills, and you will make it work and you'll be engaging regardless. It's the same with webinars. Don't get too focused on the software and the equipment. Focus on your skills. And that leads us to number 3, which is planning out the session. A webinar, just like a good face-to-face session, you need a session plan. You need to know where you're going. You need to know those times that you're going to hit so you stay on track with your session plan. And finally, number 4, just practice. Practice a lot. Practice by yourself, practice with a friend, practice with a group. We do that at MRWED. If we're doing something new in webinars, and especially when we're getting new people up to speed with delivering webinars, we do practice runs. And I cannot tell you how many practice runs I did before I actually jumped on with real people. So strongly recommend that to you. Practice till it hurts, and you'll be in great shape to deliver world-class presentations online. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you 5 more concrete tips. And these all relate to the third part of that 4-stage process, which is planning the session. And these are things that you can do, and they do require bravery. And this is why the special sauce is so important. So let's apply the secret sauce, and let's have a look at these 5 things. We've got them on the screen there, and they're blanked out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you 20 seconds to pop those down. If you're a note taker, I'll give you a chance to copy those 5 down, and then I will go through and tell you what the 5 are. I see a lot of heads down. Some aren't. I love learning styles. Love it. Tactile, kinesthetic people. Knock yourselves out. Get those notes going. Visual learners, hope you're enjoying the slide. Oral learners, I promise to keep talking to keep you amused. All right. Lots of heads are up at the Perth Convention and Exhibition Centre. So let's move forward with these slides, guys. Number 1, be the expert. You know how we start presenting something for the first time? There's this little voice in our head, and the little voice says, who are you to be presenting this content? Do you really know what you're doing? Do you really think you can do this very well? Are you really an expert? The bottom line is if we listen to that little voice, we'd never present anything. And that would be a shame because, you know, you guys are trainers and I'm sure you've all got terrific skills. So we have to work our way past that. What I'm going to ask you to do, I did promise at the start of the webinar today was I'd give you a chance to interact with each other. What I want you to do within your tables or within the people sitting close to you, and if you've got no one near you at all and you're by yourself, just pop it in the chat. I want you to just take literally 1 minute, and I'll be timing you, 1 minute to just discuss that with your table. What does it mean to be an expert in the webinar environment? What are the consequences of that? Away you go, folks. You've got 1 minute. I'm just going to sit here very silently to give you a chance to think. "30 seconds to go, guys. 30 seconds. Okay, guys, we might start winding up the discussion there. So as much as I would love to go through with you all the answers and all your responses, time limitations will hold us back, but I'll give you a couple of thoughts to think about, okay? And one of them is you want to communicate your expertise or your social proof. You want to communicate why you're the expert and why you can be trusted. But you want to do it in a humble way. You don't want to do it in an over-top way like, look at me, I'm so fantastic. Because people do not respond to that. They don't like that. You don't want to put anyone down. You don't want to be a smart aleck. And participants will normally trust you unless you let them down. So if you don't let them down, they will normally work with you. And you can have some confidence that, you know, they will trust that you're the expert and you will be able to move forward with confidence. Let's move forward. The next slide is basically a reminder to us to be the expert. Other people might not know what cards we're holding, but let's presume that we're holding good cards and that we're valuable in terms of what we're going to present. That's the only way we can derive the confidence we need to make presenting a success. And that applies both face-to-face and also in an online environment as well. So have that confidence to be the expert. The second one is to be personal. And this ties a little bit with what we were talking about earlier on. Thanks, Broom, for letting me know you're still there. Love your work. Guys, be personal. Try to do what you can to let your participants know that you care about them and that you're interested in them. Now, I've got an interesting slide of a lady holding an umbrella. And it's really interesting that the idea of being personal and being different is really, really important to us. Be yourself. Don't try and be a robot. Don't try and copy someone else. Be an individual. That's the best way to be personal and to create personal relationships with the people that you're training. Now, here's an interesting question for you. I'm going to show you a picture of two singers, okay? And singer number one is coming up on the slide now. And the question is, which of these singers do you relate to? Number one or number two? Which of the two catches your attention? Which one would you be more likely to want to go and see in concert? And let's take the genre of the music out of it. Don't be presumptuous about that. But which of these two singers do you think you'd like to go and see? Now, for the sake of time and because we've got people in different locations, I'm going to have a guess, and I can't see the video in Perth at the moment, unfortunately, but I'm going to have a guess that most of you selected number two. Okay. And the reason people are attracted typically to number two rather than number one is because number one looks a bit fake, a little bit organized, a little bit not really connected with her emotions. Whereas number two is belting out the tune. The emotion is there. And we are attracted to people who show emotion. In the same way as we're attracted to number two singer, our students will be attracted to us if we show emotion. So it's very important. Don't hesitate to dance. Don't hesitate to get out there and dance and let yourself loose and let your personality shine through. It's so valuable and so important. Number three is use the webcam. Now, I've had the webcam going almost continuously today. The webcam helps create that relationship. It takes bravery to use the webcam. I have no doubt about that. For many of you, the one thing that you might hate about the thought of doing webinars and presenting online is the webcam. Please let me do webinars, but I won't use the webcam is something I hear a lot. If you can overcome that, that would be brilliant. So try to overcome your fear of the webcam and try to establish that personal connection. And trust me, folks, your face won't be any worse than this one. Okay? Trust yourself. It's not about how good you look. It's not about being a rock star. It's about creating the online presence and creating that relationship with your participants. Here's my options. What do you think is going to look the best? Option A, if I'm presenting face-to-face. So if I'm going face-to-face and we've got option A going, do you think that's going to work well? Or the ceremonial option B? Now, is it fair to suggest that if you're presenting face-to-face, option A is definitely the best option. And you don't want to be doing option B. There's no way that we would put a box over our head if we were presenting face-to-face. So as parallel for that, put the webcam on. Show people you care. Show them that you're genuinely interested in them, and show them that you want to engage with them and you're going to be personal. It works so much better. So please consider using the webcam. You don't have to use it the whole time. Even if you turn on for 1 minute at the start and 1 minute at the end, it makes a big difference to the level of engagement you're going to have with your participants. Number 4, don't use scripts. So when you're delivering an online presentation, guys, you don't want to be doing this. To the rookie presenter, the opportunity to script out your entire presentation sounds like nirvana. When presenting online, you're only an off toggle away on the webinar control panel for the webcam to be gone. Away from the prying eyes of eager webinar participants, an online presenter can present their content without anybody being aware they're reading every word. It's every bit as magnificent as using a teleprompter. But the bottom line is it doesn't create engagement. So turn the webcam on and don't use scripts. Be yourself, make a few mistakes, throw in a few ums and ahs. It creates that humanness that people relate to. If you read from scripts, this is the result you should expect. You're going to put your participants to sleep. And it just takes a really long time to prepare scripts. So do whatever you can to avoid that. Rip them up, throw them away. Let yourself shine through, look at the audience and talk to them just like you would in a face-to-face presentation. And number 5, answer questions without notice. Some people deliberately structure their online presentations so they're not going to get any questions in the middle and they know what the questions are going to be at the end, or they leave so little time that there's no chance for questions. I strongly recommend against it. If somebody's got a question and wants to ask it, give them the chance to ask that question as you move through the presentation. It's much more effective. Let them put their hand up. Let them tell you what they're thinking. Engage with your participants. At the end of the day, out of all the things that we've talked about, it's about having a commitment. If you want to be a great online presenter, then take a deep breath and make a commitment to yourself to be brave. Be brave so you get those 4 benefits we talked about. You want to get people connected. You want to get them engaged. You want to work through the emotions and you want to establish a positive relationship with them. And then you want to involve those 4 steps that we've talked about in terms of involving people in your presentations and involving yourself by being brave. Be the expert, be personal, use the webcam, don't use scripts, and answer questions without notice. If you do those 5 things, you're going to jettison yourself from being a ho-hum in the webinar space to somebody who your participants are going to love. We all want to be superheroes, but we don't want to be superheroes that look like the 2 guys on our screen. We want to go a step further than that. We want to engage our participants. We want to be super webinar presenters. You want to be superheroes that look more like the guy with the red and yellow. And that's what I want to encourage you to do today. Be brave, get out there, trust yourself, and just give it a go. And the results will jettison you and propel you forward. All right, guys, that's the end of my content for today. So happy to take any questions. We've probably only got another minute or 2, and I'm sure that your moderators there are going to tell us when to stop. So have we got time for 1 or 2 quick questions before we have to bring this to a halt?
What tools, I'm sorry if I missed it earlier on, but what tools are you using right now to produce this? Is this just Blackboard Ultra that you've used, or have you got Screencast-O-Matic or something else there recording what you're doing?
Okay, today we're using Blackboard Ultra, okay. The recording is being taken from your end, so I presume that's using the native software within Blackboard Ultra. If I want to record a webinar myself outside the software, I use ScreenFlow because I've got a Mac, only costs $99. Oh, it's an awesome piece of software. I geek out with ScreenFlow all the time. The alternative for PC users is Camtasia. I think it costs quite a bit more, but it's very good. I've heard good things about it as well. We use GoTo Training as the delivery software for our webinars at MRWED, but there's lots of really, really good options out there. Today, just for your reference too, I'm using Audio Technica ATR 2100 microphone and the Bose noise cancelling earbuds are beautiful as well. That way I haven't got this big headset all over my face, which hides me. So that's what I'm using today, and that's my stock standard routine. Next question, please.
I've been teaching in Collaborate now since 2009, and I find my biggest hurdle is getting students to pick up that mic. Once I run a class every week, and once they've done it for a little while, and I've sort of almost made them pick up the mic, they get used to it, but they really do feel quite uncomfortable in speaking. They're quite happy to be chatting away in the chat area, but when it comes to getting on mic or putting their webcam on, they really don't like to do that. I just wondered how you would sort of, what tips you would have to encourage the students to get involved.
Thanks for your question, Caroline. I started beaming halfway through your question because the answer I was formulating in my head was exactly what you said. I think the best way to do it, to be honest, is to almost force them to do it. Create an environment where they have to do it. Now, you don't necessarily give them a lot of advance notice about that. You might want to tell them to have a microphone connected, and so that so they might not think too much of it. But I think you do want to create that environment where you're almost forcing them into it. Maybe not during the first webinar, but during the second one, almost take them by surprise by calling them out and saying, okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to get some feedback to what I talked about at my previous webinar, or I've got a question, and I just want to go right around the whole room and get everyone to give me their responses. And once you get, and pick your people carefully. If you pick your first 2 or 3 people carefully as to people who maybe already jumped on the mic, or people who you think are going to be more engaged, or people you've taught before, it gets a snowball effect. And before you know it, you've got them all in, because like you said, once people start to use the microphone and start to use the webcam, the chances are they'll keep using it with confidence. So love your work, Caroline. Good question. I love the way you're approaching it. And some man is just jumping in front of me and giving me the big wind-up signal. So I will do that. Guys, I want to say thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Mike. Hey, you guys have been fantastic. You've been doing lots of smiling, at least the folks in Perth, and I appreciate the folks in Broome and elsewhere who've contributed as well. I've had a fun time. Just be brave, guys. Just go for it. Be awesome. Let's make Western Australia the best webinar presenters in Australia, although don't tell the eastern states I said that, please. But thank you very much for participating today.
Authorised by the Government of Western Australia, Perth.